I never thought a $20 necklace would be the thing that cracked my marriage open like an egg. My name's Marissa. I'm 38, live in Oregon, and I've been married to Brian for almost 12 years. We don't have kids. Couldn't after a few rough years of trying, but we built a life together. A decent house, 2 dogs, camping trips every summer. Nothing fancy, but steady. Safe. Or so I thought. Lately, I'd started taking night classes at the local community college. Just a few intro business courses. I work night shifts as a nurse at the hospital, and honestly, I was burnt out. I wanted something more stable. Brian never supported the idea. He'd smirk and say things like, "What are you gonna do with that? Open a lemonade stand?" I used to laugh it off. Told myself he just didn't understand. But something about the way he said it started to sting. He'd been acting weird for a while, working later than usual, suddenly invested in his gym routine again. Started wearing cologne he hadn't touched in years. I tried not to read too much into it. God knows I didn't want to be that wife. But the gut never lies. Still, I kept quiet. Then last Friday, I came home early from class. Our professor canceled last minute, so I figured I'd surprise Brian with takeout from his favorite Thai spot. His car was in the driveway. All the lights were off except in the living room. I walked in, quietly, figuring he might be dozing on the couch. Instead, I found him on FaceTime. Shirt half unbuttoned, sitting in dim light, talking low and soft to someone I couldn't see. I froze in the hallway. I didn't want to believe what I was hearing, but then I caught it. "I can't wait to see your face when you open it. You've been so patient with me, baby." My stomach dropped. I didn't recognize his voice. It was his, sure, but not the way he ever spoke to me. Not in years. I backed out before he saw me and sat in the car until he texted saying he was just finishing a report. I drove around for an hour before going home. When I got back, he was in bed already, pretending to be asleep. I stared at him for a long time that night. My husband, my best friend, or who I thought he was. The next day, a package arrived with my name on it. I hadn't ordered anything, so I assumed Brian had sent me something to make up for how distant he'd been. I smiled, even let myself hope. Inside was a delicate silver necklace with a little engraved tag. I turned it over. To Ellie, can't wait to spend forever with you. B. I stared at it for a full minute, not breathing. He didn't even bother using a different shipping name. I sat on the floor with that necklace in my hand, feeling like my lungs were full of cement. For a second, I thought I might throw up. Then I felt still. Cold. I placed the necklace back in the box. Didn't cry. Didn't scream. I just sat there in the kitchen where we used to laugh over burnt pancakes and Sunday crossword puzzles, thinking, this is the moment everything changes. And it did. Because I wasn't going to confront him. Not yet. I was going to find out who Ellie was, and exactly how long my husband had been living a double life, right under my nose. Turns out, finding Ellie wasn't as hard as I thought. The necklace Brian had sent came from a custom jewelry site that kept order histories tied to the email. And Brian, in his infinite stupidity or arrogance, used our shared Gmail. I logged in that same night and scrolled through the confirmation email, then opened his recent browser tabs. One was a Facebook profile, Ellie Jameson, 26, yoga instructor, auburn hair, big toothy smile, a few pictures of her with a baby on her hip, one with Brian at a pumpkin patch, captioned, "My boys, my boys." The air left my lungs. I zoomed in on Brian's face. He looked relaxed, happier than I'd seen him in years. He was crouched down next to the little boy, maybe 3 years old with matching flannel shirts and chocolate-smeared faces, my husband, and a child I'd never met. We'd tried so hard for kids, spent years crying over negative tests, miscarriages, doctor visits, surgeries. I blamed my body. He held me at night and told me we'll be okay, as long as we have each other. All lies. I shut the laptop and sat in the dark until morning. That was the night something in me snapped. Not in a loud, dramatic way. No broken plates, no screaming. It was quieter than that. I just stopped pretending I didn't see the truth. For the next week, I acted normal. I packed his lunch. I folded his laundry. I asked about his day. And every night while he worked late, I tracked him. It wasn't hard. Brian reused the same passwords for everything. I pulled his location history, checked his Venmo, dug into our joint bank account. Thursday night, he spent $63 at Chuck E. Cheese in Hillsboro. He told me he was at a data recovery seminar in Beaverton. I copied every receipt, took screenshots. I even bought a burner phone and texted Ellie, pretending to be someone selling baby toys from a local mom group. She responded instantly. Friendly, trusting. We met in a Target parking lot that Saturday. I wore a hoodie and sunglasses, heart thudding so hard it hurt. But when she walked up to my car, smiling with her toddler in tow, I couldn't speak. Because the kid had Brian's eyes. "I'm Ellie," she chirped. "Sorry I'm a few minutes late. Nap schedule's been a mess this week. Brian was gonna come but had to work last minute again. Poor guy." Work. I handed her the baby toys. She handed me a $10 bill. That was supposed to be it. But then she said, "Are you in the local group too?" Brian says it's been a godsend, especially since we don't really have family nearby. Something inside me burned. Family nearby? I was nearby. I was his damn wife. I looked her dead in the eye. "I'm not in the group," I said quietly, "but I think we need to talk." Her face froze. "Sorry?" "I'm Marissa," I said. "Brian's wife. His legal wife." The silence was nuclear. I watched the realization spread across her face. First confusion, then denial, then something like horror. No, she whispered, holding her kid tighter. "He said you passed away. Cancer. 3 years ago." 3 years. He told her I was dead. I opened my purse and pulled out a manila envelope full of documents. Our marriage license, utility bills in both our names, photos of me and Brian from last month on our anniversary trip. Ellie sat down on the curb. Her hands were shaking. The little boy, blissfully unaware, munched on a cracker in her lap. "I didn't know," she said over and over. "I swear I didn't know." I believed her. And I felt sorry for her. Almost. But mostly I was done. This wasn't just a lie. This was a life. A second household. A kid. A woman he'd built a whole fantasy with, while coming home to me like nothing had changed. I could have confronted Brian right then, thrown everything in his face, let it all explode. But suddenly I realized he didn't deserve that. He deserved worse. So I looked at Ellie, eyes still puffy, cheeks pale, and I said, "Do you want to help me ruin his life?" I thought the hardest part would be discovering the affair. I was wrong. The hardest part was pretending I didn't know. Pretending every dinner, every half-hearted kiss, every "love you, babe" meant something when I knew it was all a lie. But I wasn't playing the fool anymore. Ellie and I had met, shared notes, and discovered the horrifying extent of Brian's double life. He wasn't just cheating. He was living 2 lives. 2 women, 2 homes, 2 realities stitched together by lies and gaslighting. Ellie, to her credit, was done. She packed a bag and left their apartment with her son the next day. She told Brian she was taking a quick trip to visit her sister. He bought it. Of course he did. He was too busy juggling lies to notice the walls closing in. Meanwhile, I was preparing for something more permanent. I didn't want a screaming match. I didn't want broken plates or tears on the kitchen floor. I wanted witnesses. So I planned a dinner. I told Brian it was to celebrate my promotion at the hospital, which of course didn't exist. But his ego needed a reason to show up. I invited a few of our close friends. And I reached out to someone else too. His boss. The one who believed Brian was working late all these nights for extra hours to support his grieving widow and her new schooling dream. Yeah, that lie too. I booked the back room of a restaurant we used to love. Quiet, upscale, intimate. I wore a black wrap dress and the red lipstick Brian always said was too much. I wanted to look exactly like the woman he'd underestimated. He walked in 5 minutes late, flashing that smug, charming smile like nothing in the world was off. I greeted him with a kiss on the cheek, then waved over the waiter. "Before we order," I said calmly, "I have something to share." He looked confused. I stood up, holding a folder in my hand. "Brian and I have been married for 12 years, I said to the table. "We've had our ups and downs like anyone. But what I didn't know, what none of you knew, is that for the last 3 years, he's also been living with another woman. In a whole other apartment. With their son." I heard the fork clatter from across the table. Brian laughed. A dry, panicked sound. "Marissa, what are you— This isn't funny." "Not a joke," I said, placing photos on the table. "This is Ellie. This is their child. These are the rent receipts. And here's the best part. He told her I was dead." Gasps. Actual gasps. Brian turned pale. One of our friends, Lisa, stood up and said, "Is this real?" "Brian, tell me this isn't real." He stammered. I didn't mean for it to go that far. It was complicated." "No," I said, cutting him off. "What's complicated is how you planned a future with a second family while crawling into bed next to me every night. What's complicated is that you let me blame myself for our infertility while raising a son with someone else." Silence. Brian's boss shifted uncomfortably. "Brian," he said slowly, "I think we're going to need to have a serious conversation at the office." "I can explain," Brian said, now visibly sweating. "None of this affects my work." "Except it does," his boss replied. "We've been trusting you with sensitive data, and now we find out you've been lying about your entire life. I don't trust your judgment anymore." Brian's voice rose. "This is insane. You're ruining my life over a personal matter." I stared at him. "You ruined our lives the moment you decided honesty was optional." The room went quiet again, and that's when I dropped the real twist. I pulled out a small envelope and placed it in front of him. He opened it, hands shaking. Inside was a copy of a legal complaint. Not just divorce papers, but a formal fraud report tied to our joint tax filings. "You claimed Ellie and her son as dependents," I said, calm as glass. "Which is interesting because I never gave you permission to use our joint income to support your secret family." He looked up, mouth open. "You're not just a cheater, Brian," I said. "You're a criminal." He stood up abruptly, face red, breath shallow. "You can't do this." I leaned back in my chair. "I already did." I wish I could say Brian left quietly after the dinner, but liars don't go down without a fight. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls, 3 voicemails, and a long-winded email that started with, "Let's talk like adults," and ended with, "You're throwing away everything we built." Right. By noon, he was banging on the front door of our house. The house I worked overtime to help pay off. The one with my name on every damn deed and mortgage. I didn't answer. I let him pound, shout, plead through the door while I sat at the kitchen table, sipping coffee, watching the security camera feed on my laptop. I had changed the locks the night before. A small thing, but symbolic, necessary. Eventually he left, or so I thought. That night, I came home from Ellie's place. She'd offered me her guest room while I sorted out my next steps, and found the side window cracked open. Kitchen drawers slightly ajar. Picture frames off kilter. He'd broken in, not to take anything. Number that would be too straightforward. He'd come to erase. He deleted files off my laptop, my applications for graduate school, the financial budget I'd been building for months. He poured water on the paper copies and slashed through my journal with a box cutter, pages torn out, shredded, soaking in the sink. That's when I snapped. I called the cops, filed a restraining order, and contacted my lawyer to move the divorce into emergency status. I wasn't playing anymore, but I wasn't done either. You see, Brian still had one thing he cared about more than his ego: his reputation, his spotless record at work, his side hustle consulting gigs with small tech startups who thought he was some Silicon Valley whiz just waiting for his big break. So I sent out one simple email, just one, to his freelance clients. A heads up about a personal situation they may want to be aware of. I attached the fraud report, redacted most of it, kept it professional, polite even, but clear. He lost all 3 consulting gigs within 48 hours. That same week, I had Ellie help me pack up all of Brian's remaining things into cardboard boxes. No labels, just return to sender. I hired movers to drop them at his office, at 10 a.m. sharp, during his team's weekly stand-up meeting. Petty? Maybe. But it felt good. The thing is, I thought I'd feel satisfied by then. I thought watching him lose control would be enough. But the truth is, revenge only fills the cracks. It doesn't rebuild anything. So I started doing that part too. I reapplied to graduate school. This time, I used a cloud drive backup. I reached out to the hospital's HR department and transferred to a daytime shift, cutting my hours, giving myself space. I started therapy. I went to yoga with Ellie, which felt weird at first, but I needed to remember how to breathe again. And slowly, the anger softened. Not disappeared, but shifted. It became fuel. Until one afternoon, 2 weeks later, I got an email from a name I hadn't seen before. Cynthia Vaughn. The subject line just said, "Are you still married to Brian Hamilton?" I opened it, heart in my throat. Cynthia introduced herself as a freelance photographer Brian had worked with over the past year. They'd gone on a few weekend work retreats together. She had no idea he was married. She found out from a mutual connection who saw my viral post about the dinner. That post, Lisa, one of our dinner guests, had anonymously shared on a local community thread. But here's the part that made my blood run cold. Cynthia said she believed she might be pregnant. Pregnant, with Brian's child, while he was juggling me and Ellie already. I stared at the screen, every nerve in my body firing at once. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. This man was a serial manipulator, a narcissist with a pattern. We weren't chapters in his story, we were casualties. And just like that, I knew. This wasn't the end. This was the beginning of a bigger reckoning. When Cynthia told me she was pregnant, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even feel shocked anymore. At that point, I wasn't surprised Brian had managed to betray yet another woman. What did surprise me was how numb I felt. Like whatever was left of the hurt had calcified into something hard and sharp and clear. I thanked her for reaching out, gave her the number to my lawyer, and told her gently she deserved better. Then I closed the laptop, walked into the bathroom, and stared at myself in the mirror. I looked tired, but not broken. That was important. The next morning, I filed a motion to freeze Brian's joint assets. Turns out he'd started draining our shared savings, probably to cover whatever mess he'd made with Cynthia. My lawyer moved fast, thank God. We locked down every account before he could pull another dollar. Then I did one final thing. I mailed a packet. To HR at his job. To Ellie's custody lawyer. And yes, to the local DA's office. Inside, copies of his fraudulent tax filings, statements from Ellie, documentation from Cynthia, and a sworn affidavit I'd written detailing the years of deceit, the multiple households, and the financial misconduct. Brian was under investigation within a week. I don't know what exactly broke him, whether it was getting fired, being cut off from every woman he manipulated, or realizing that his entire web of lies had finally collapsed. But he stopped fighting. He signed the divorce papers without even contesting the property split. I kept the house, the car, my pension, everything. I didn't see him again until the hearing. He showed up wearing a suit 2 sizes too big, dark circles under his eyes like he hadn't slept in weeks. When the judge read the terms of the asset division, and the fact that the court had approved criminal charges pending a grand jury, he barely blinked, just nodded, lips pressed tight. Outside the courthouse, I passed him in the hallway. He didn't speak, but I did. "You burned down everything you had," I said quietly. "And for what? Cheap lies? Temporary control?" He looked at me like someone waking up from anesthesia. Confused, disoriented, hollow. "I didn't know who I was without all of it," he whispered. I met his gaze, steady. "Then maybe it's time you figure that out. Alone." That was the last thing I ever said to him. 6 months later, I walked across the stage at graduation with my degree in business administration. Ellie was there, cheering in the front row with her son. Cynthia sent flowers. I'd built a quiet sisterhood with the women Brian tried to divide and conquer. And I'd built a new life. Slowly, from the ground up. On my own terms. I work at a local nonprofit now, helping women escape coercive financial abuse. Never thought I'd be that woman. But here I am. And I'm stronger than I've ever been. People ask me sometimes if I regret any of it. The revenge, the exposure, the mess. Here's the truth. I don't. Brian lost his reputation, his job, his fake families, and any mask he thought he could hide behind. I didn't destroy him. He did that to himself. I just held up the mirror and let the world see. And me? I didn't just survive. I rebuilt. Better. Wiser. Free. Never let someone make you feel small for asking for more. You can be loving and clear-eyed, forgiving and done. I learned that closure doesn't come from them apologizing. It comes from you refusing to keep bleeding for someone who keeps stabbing. If you've ever been through something like this, or you're going through it now, share it below. I promise you're not alone. And if this story hit close to home, stick around. There's more where that came from. Thanks for listening. Truly, this was personal.